In the small town of Eldermere, there was a legend about a girl who lost her voice. It was said that her cries echoed through the dark woods nearby, haunting the lonely paths and winding trails, calling for help, but no one dared to venture there at night. The old folks warned children not to play near the edge of the forest, where shadows twisted like dancers and danced beneath the gnarled trees. Parents would gather their little ones close and tell stories with serious faces, urging their children to avoid the forest after dusk, warning that eerie things lurked in the darkness. If you linger too long, they said, their eyes wide with fear, you might hear the whispers of the girl who vanished. But Ava was different. She was not afraid of tales. In fact, she found them intriguing. Curious and adventurous, she loved exploring uncharted territories that her friends avoided. Her imagination was wild, and she often dreamed of uncovering secrets hidden in the woods, treasures waiting to be discovered beneath the tangled roots and behind thick bushes. One dreary afternoon, when the sun struggled to peek through the gray and heavy clouds, Ava decided to wander toward the forest alone. This was not an unusual choice for her, as her friends had all giggled nervously and refused to join her in this adventure. Their voices quivered as they warned her it was too terrifying. "What if the girl is real?" one had said, her eyes darting up to the trees as if expecting to see shadows come to life. But undeterred, Ava tightened the straps on her backpack and stepped toward the forest, determined to prove her friends wrong and discover the truth. As she entered the woods, the air grew cooler and fresher, leaving the warm day behind. The scent of damp earth and pine filled her nose, as thick as the fog that began to roll in, wrapping around her like a chilly blanket. With every step deeper into the underbrush, Ava felt the rustling leaves beneath her feet and heard the faintest crackles of twigs snapping. Yet the usual cheerful chorus of birds had vanished, replaced by an unsettling silence that pressed against her ears, making her feel both thrilled and uneasy. Suddenly, she could swear she heard muffled voices in the distance, like snippets of a conversation cut off by the thick thicket. Her skin prickled, sending shivers down her spine as she glanced around to ensure she remained alone. For a moment, she thought she caught the sinister gaze of something lurking behind a tree, watching her with eyes that glinted like polished stones. Ava shook her head, dispelling the thought as she pressed on. As she continued her exploration, the ground began to slope downwards, leading her to a small, dilapidated cabin nestled among the ancient trees. Its once vibrant color had faded, now cloaked in patches of gray and dark stains that suggested long years of neglect. The door hung askew, creaking ominously in the wind like a weary sentinel guarding its secrets. Once again, a surge of excitement coursed through her veins, battling against the knot of dread twisting in her stomach. With her heart pounding like a drumbeat in her chest, Ava confidently stepped onto the porch. The floorboards groaning beneath her weight felt like a warning, but curiosity outweighed any fear. Inside, the cabin was dim, with only a sliver of light piercing through the grimy window. Dust coated every surface like a gray blanket, while cobwebs decorated the corners like delicate lacework, shimmering faintly in the filtered light. The air was thick with the scent of mildew, reminding her just how old this place must be. In the center of the room stood an old rocking chair, swaying gently as if it had just been occupied. Its wooden surface felt cool against her fingertips when she touched it, and Ava felt an overwhelming urge to sit and uncover the dust-covered secrets hidden within the walls. As she approached the chair cautiously, a sudden guttural whisper echoed around her, sending chills cascading down her spine. The voice, soft yet unmistakably sinister, seemed to dance through the air, murmuring her name like a haunting melody, "Ava." "Ava," she gasped, a mix of surprise and terror gripping her heart. Her heart raced at the sound. She turned to run, panic bubbling within her, but the moment she did, the door behind her slammed shut, trapping her inside the claustrophobic space. "No, please, let me out," she tried to shout, her voice scrabbling against her throat. But the only result was silence. Ava clutched her throat in confusion. Why couldn't she scream? Why couldn't she call for help? As fear swelled within her, the whispering grew louder, echoing around the room as if it mocked her desperation. It filled the cabin with an evil laughter that chilled her to the core, wrapping around her thoughts like a vine, squeezing tighter and tighter. Ava's breath quickened, and she felt dizzy, as though the very air around her had grown thick with dread. The darkness seemed to close in on her, shadows pulsing across the floor like waves, wrapping around her feet like icy tendrils. Ava's heart thudded violently as she stumbled back toward the rocking chair. It felt as though the walls were alive now, breathing in sync with her growing terror. She could almost see the horrors lurking just beyond the veil of darkness, grotesque forms writhing and stretching, always just out of sight. With desperate gasps, she fought against the overwhelming fear that clung to her like a heavy cloak. Shadows gathered, murmuring and swirling, pushing her further back until she felt cornered. With a surge of fear and adrenaline, Ava dashed for the window, clawing frantically at the grime-covered pane. She pressed her face close against the cool glass, desperately trying to look outside. She could see the fog swirling outside like a hungry predator waiting for its prey. But with every shout, every plea for escape, a terrible realization dawned on her. Her voice was vanishing. It slipped away like grains of sand through her fingers, leaving only a deafening silence in its wake. Choking back tears, Ava pressed her hands against the old window frame, but there was no escape. The thick fog swirled ravenously, while inside the cabin, the shadows inched closer, enveloping her within an impenetrable gloom. She could feel her heart pounding in her ears, drowning out everything else. Swallowing hard, she tried once more to scream. Only the sound of silence echoed back at her, mocking her futile attempts for freedom. Despair crept in like a thief in the night, wrapping itself around her mind until Ava could do nothing but cringe, clutching her knees tightly to her chest as she fell into the rocking chair. The eerie stillness of the cabin settled over her like a suffocating blanket, wrapping her in a world that felt increasingly dark. The whispers became senseless babble, creating a confusing cacophony that drove her further into despair and madness. The shadows gathered closer now, twisting and morphing, flickering with every heartbeat, each flicker burning imprints into her mind. She could see them clearly now, the shadowy figures draped in cloaks of darkness, their eyes glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. Time felt warped as hours seemed to crawl by like thick syrup. She felt the weight of her voice slipping away, leaving her hushed in a realm where shadows and prey played their sinister game. Amidst the chaos, a final whisper broke through, a single, blood-curdling whisper that lingered in the air like a chilling frost. "I will speak for you." The words curled around her heart, chilling her further, igniting a flicker of alarm deep within. What did it mean? Who would speak for her? As the shadows danced, she felt a strange blend of fear and curiosity rising within her. Would she find the truth about the girl whose voice was lost? Or was she destined to become just another lost whisper in the dark woods of Eldermere? Ava's heart raced as she realized this was only the beginning of her adventure. She needed to find a way to break free, to reclaim her voice. Gathering her courage and determination, she knew she had to discover who, or what, was behind the ghostly whisper. When dawn finally broke, Ava awoke in the rocking chair. The sunlight streamed through the dusty window, illuminating the cabin in a harsh light that almost felt mocking. Dust motes danced lazily in the rays, floating like tiny fairies caught in a spotlight. She felt disoriented, as if she had fought through a nightmarish dream, but the fear lingered like a shadow hanging just out of sight. Ava rubbed her eyes, trying to shake off the grogginess that clung to her like a wet blanket. Her throat burned, a painful reminder of her lost voice, as if someone had scratched it when she wasn't looking. She instinctively touched her throat, hoping it would help, but nothing changed. It was then that she heard it, a voice that was not her own. "Good morning, Ava," it said, smooth and inviting yet tinged with an unsettling tone. Ava's heart raced, her eyes wide with terror. Where was the voice coming from? It felt as if the space around her was alive and breathing, whispering secrets she could not understand. A panic seized her, tightening her chest like a vice as she struggled to respond, but her lips would not part, they remained firmly shut. A wave of realization crashed over her, hitting her with the force of a tidal wave. Not only had her voice faded, but now there was another one, mocking her and speaking through her. She felt like a puppet, strings pulled by unseen hands, and the world around her seemed surreal and twisted. Her heart raced faster, threatening to escape her chest. She bolted upright, clenching her fists, trying to find a gasp, a breath, anything to regain her control. The cabin around her seemed to swirl, the walls closing in on her, crowned with sinister shadows that moved like living creatures. The wood creaked beneath her as if it shared her distress. The voice continued, "There's no need to be afraid. I am here, and I will always be here." It rolled through her head, shaping her thoughts as she felt a cold dread seep into her bones. "Who are you?" Ava thought, yet the words never left her mind, trapped within the prison of her throat. The voice responded, its tone blending with the very air that surrounded her. "I am the echo of your fears. I speak for you now. Together, we shall whisper in the dark." It was a grotesque concept, sharing her existence with something she could not see, something that crept into her thoughts and whispered sinister intentions that made her skin crawl. She wanted to scream, to shatter the silence that surrounded her, but all she managed was a silent plea that seemed to be swallowed by an unseen force, lost in the shadows. Ava stood up, determined to escape the cabin and the haunting voice that plagued her. She pushed against the door, and to her surprise, it swung open with ease, revealing a world that was both familiar and chilling. The moment she stepped outside, a chill swept over her, and the fog began to creep back in around her ankles. The air was heavy and damp, wrapping around her like an unwelcome embrace. The trees loomed like jurors in a court, their gnarled limbs whispering secrets among themselves, sharing tales of those who had come before. She looked towards the town, her home, nestled beyond the reach of the foreboding trees. She could almost see the familiar rooftops, the fluttering laundry on the lines, and the smoky tendrils of breakfast rising from chimneys. "Don't be foolish, Ava," the voice chimed cheerfully, its tone almost playful. "What awaits for you there is much worse than what you fear here. Stay with me, and let us discover its secrets." A tugging sensation pulled at her mind, dark tendrils curling around her thoughts like serpents, squeezing her heart like a fragile bird caught in a snare. Ava felt an unholy connection to the voice within. It was captivating yet horrifying, bathing her in shadow while exposing her to unseen horrors. Desperation clawed at her heart. She did not want to succumb to the voice, but the feeling of wanting to belong overwhelmed her. The shadows offered a sinister allure. As she moved deeper into the forest, the voice guided her, its words weaving a tapestry of dark promises that felt as if they were made for her ears alone. "Let go of your fears, dear Ava. With every step, your voice shall grow stronger while they all grow weaker." With every step she took into the darkness, she felt the stirring of a malevolent joy bubble within her, like a long-buried treasure surfacing to the top. Silence enveloped her, only to be punctuated by the whispers, calling her deeper, compelling her to discover what lay beneath the cloak of night. Shadows danced along her path, remnants of souls long lost, and as their cries melded into the air, Ava found herself entranced by the beauty of the darkness that tugged at her heart. Driven by an overpowering craving for answers, she lost herself in the woods, adopting the role of a vessel for the voice within. Each rustling leaf and crackling twig seemed to guide her onward, pushing her further into the tangled embrace of the trees. Her heart bled for the light of day, but darkness wrapped her tighter. She was spiraling into a chasm where sanity and reason wavered. The score of voices around her grew sharper, mingling until they formed a cacophony of despair, and she realized she had unwittingly become a part of their sorrow. In the clenching shadows, she encountered a strange gathering. Ghostly figures flickered in and out of view, their faces twisted in eternal agony. They seemed to drift like smoke, their forms impermanent and ephemeral, like wisps of memory that couldn't find their way home. They whispered to her about a curse that plagued Eldermere, a vile spell that fed on the lost voices of the living. The truth unfolded like a flower in the dark, petals revealing a time when the town had been alive with laughter and joy. Through the chorus of the damned, she grasped fragments of hushed tales that spiraled around her, tales of betrayal, of menacing spirits, of a time when silence reigned supreme, when the very air felt suffocated by a weight of despair. In that moment, a sharp clarity jutted through her mind like a ray of sunlight through the clouds. She understood that the voices were bound to the woods, their spirits ensnared by the same malevolence that had captivated her. They were victims of darkness, trapped in a web that she now felt herself becoming a part of. The haunting whispers urged her on, flooding her veins with chilling energy and driving her deeper into the shadows. The voice she had been harboring began to merge with the ghosts surrounding her, a giddying sensation that felt like a roller coaster racing too fast around a sharp bend. Ava was becoming them, intertwining her fate with theirs. She felt their sorrow wrapping around her heart, squeezing tighter with each passing moment. It was as if she was a ship caught in a storm, lost at sea with no way to navigate or escape. What would happen if she lost herself completely? The trees twisted around her, their branches like arms reaching for her, wanting to pull her into their embrace. But amidst the anxiety, a spark of excitement crackled within her. "You have strength in silence," the voice said, its tone sliding smoothly through her thoughts. "When you embrace what you truly are, you'll be free." Ava closed her eyes, allowing the energy of the woods to wash over her. She felt weightless, as if she were floating above the ground. The shadows embraced her, wrapping her in their dark warmth. The whispers became clearer, stories intertwining like strands of silk, creating a beautiful tapestry of pain and hope. The laughter of children echoed faintly in her memory, and she thought of her friends, their faces brightened by the sun. But that warmth felt distant, and the voice now urged her to let it go. "Can they really understand you, Ava? Or will they only judge you?" It taunted, its tone draping over her like a heavy cloak. It was true. There were secrets buried deep within her that she had never revealed to anyone. She had always felt like the odd one out, the girl who saw shadows dancing in places others could not see. No one would ever really know what she felt, would they? "Stay with me," the voice coaxed, his tone dropping to a whisper full of promise. "Together, we can unravel the stories of this land. The shadows of Eldermere are waiting for someone like you." Ava hesitated, her breathing shallow as she stood in the heart of the woods. The wind whispered around her, carrying with it the voices of the past, the pain of sorrow, the murmurings of lost hopes. She could feel them call to her. Was there really anyone left to truly listen? And then, she made her choice. She would explore the dark side. She would face the ghosts and their stories. With every step, she would unearth the secrets of Eldermere and the burdens chained to her own heart. As Ava took a deep breath, the voices around her seemed to swell with approval, and the shadows stretched higher, forming a pathway leading deeper into the heart of the wilderness. She took one last glance back at the path that led home, a tangled mix of emotion twined inside her. There would be no turning back now. Emboldened, she stepped forward, the darkness welcoming her as she began to uncover the echoes within. The journey was only just beginning, and Ava felt the stirring of belonging, a call to something far greater than herself. In that moment, she realized she was not just a lost voice in the trees but a keeper of secrets longing to be freed, and she was ready to discover what lay in the shadows. Days passed, perhaps weeks. Time in Eldermere became blurry and strange, like an old photograph left in the sun too long. The world outside Ava's hidden prison lost its color, fading into dullness while the villagers worried about her absence from the warm embrace of their lives. They spoke her name in hushed tones, their faces drawn tight with panic, as if the very mention of her name might summon her back. "Where is Ava? What has happened to her?" They whispered amongst themselves, their eyes darting about as if expecting her to appear at any moment. Her disappearance had shaken their hearts, like a sudden chill in the air during the summer. Many of them felt a deep, heavy sadness, a gnawing worry that perhaps something terrible had befallen her. Tensions mounted rapidly as exciting rumors began to swirl like autumn leaves caught in a tempest. Voices carried by the gusty wind warned of lost children lured away by seductive shadows that danced just beyond the flickering lights of the town. Yet even as the townspeople hunted for answers, Ava was ensnared in the woods, gliding deeper into that unknown space, her body transforming into a specter, a living whisper on the breath of the dark. The voice that resonated in her head had changed. It was no longer comforting, instead, it held an edge of discord that felt like jagged glass against her mind. "We will rise from the shadows, Ava. They have forgotten you, but we won't let them forget the sound of your sorrow," it commanded, weaving through her thoughts. There was an eerie resolve in its tone, a rhythm that syncopated with the frantic beating of Ava's corrupted heart. It felt both scary and strangely comforting, like being wrapped in a heavy, warm blanket on a cold night, despite the chill it brought. Ava felt the presence of the shades in the forest, spirits that hungered for the warmth of human life. Together, they plotted a darkness that would echo through Eldermere, luring others into the deep, enveloping embrace of the shadows. The townspeople continued to search for her, their faces etched with worry and confusion, awash in their ignorance, unaware of how close they stood to depravity, teetering on the very edge of their own doom. They had no idea what sinister plans were being woven right beneath their noses. The voices echoed and blended together, offering promises that sounded unworldly, creating a haunting choir of longing and rage. On one stormy night, under the cloak of darkness, she led the spirits to the edges of town square. Blackened figures wrapped themselves around buildings, corners, and alleyways like a noxious fog, thick and suffocating, waiting patiently for the slip of a single soul. The wind howled through the streets like a beast longing for its prey, carrying with it an eerie hymn that wove itself into the hearts of the unsuspecting townspeople. As the town fell deeper into slumber, Ava could feel their warmth draw closer, like moths fluttering toward a flame. As hours stretched into midnight, the town lay bare and vulnerable, ensnared in the dark. A thick darkness seeped through it, wrapping around the roofs like a fog that refused to lift. Those who wandered near the edges of sleep felt themselves haunted by whispers that echoed like forgotten lullabies, wrapping tightly around their dreams, seducing them deeper into the unknown. Shadows crept through open windows, filling their rooms and awakening a creeping dread that fostered confusion, chaos, and a feeling of immense uncertainty that weighed heavily on the air. Ava, now an ominous specter among them, lifted her hands, no longer fully her own but manipulated by the will of invisible forces at work. She called forth the despair that had been building within her, a dark storm raging inside. "Awaken!" She screamed inside her head, the words resounding like thunder amidst the silence. For just a brief moment, her voice returned, threading itself through the cacophony of the haunting cries that bellowed through the town. Those who had once ignored her now felt an unsettling sensation lurking in the corners of their vision. They trembled, hearts pounding ever faster like a drumbeat of imminent danger. Shadowy figures began to flit in and out of existence, haunting the periphery of their awareness. It was all a mistake, a blasphemous act to dismiss the warning signs of silence that grew heavier, darker with every heartbeat. Ava's laughter melded into the chaos, a malevolent symphony as their terror echoed back through her, feeding her power. Eldermere, once a peaceful town filled with laughter and warm sunshine, succumbed to the overwhelming darkness. It pulsated with a hunger that thrived on fear. It feasted upon the townspeople's inability to speak against the shadows looming around them. Every moment of silence turned heavier, pushing the very breath from their lungs. Hope withered, morphing into despair, like wilting flowers under a harsh sun. The townsfolk could almost hear the echoes of lost souls whispering their fates, but by then it had all come too late. They could never truly comprehend the weight of silence they had previously ignored, nor the true depth of the darkness that wrapped around them. They screamed, their voices rising high like birds taking flight, but the shadows consumed them, swallowed whole in a ravenous whirlpool of terror and despair. Echoes of anguish began to harmonize, feeding Ava's growing bond with the forest. She felt her body reforming, reshaping into something entirely new, a grotesque merging of every lost voice, spirit, and nightmare the town had ever forgot. Ava was no longer just a girl. She had become the embodiment of all the souls taken, lost just like she was. In the depths of her new existence, threads of their lives began to intertwine with hers. Memories flooded in, all tumbling together like leaves caught in a whirlwind, each one a reflection of heartache, loss, and unsaid goodbyes. Each whisper told a story of sorrow, painting the darkness around her with a blurry tapestry of dreams unfulfilled. The laughter and joy that once filled Eldermere were now memories captured in the murky boundlessness of the shadows. Ava felt both fear and a strange sense of comfort in their embrace. She was not alone anymore, she belonged to something larger than herself. But the town lay silent now, fully engulfed by the blackened shadows that consumed it, smothering it beneath their weight. It would never hear her call again, nor would it ever remember the laughter and light that once danced freely in the sun. Eldermere was lost now, swallowed by the haunting whispers that once belonged to her, every corner echoing the silent screams of lost hope. As the darkness curled around each building and street, Ava understood that she had become both the puppet and the puppeteer, binding her fate with those souls who shared her plight. With each passing moment, the whispers that swirled around her grew louder, building into a crescendo that mixed with the very essence of the wind itself. They became something grander, a chorus of forgotten dreams and silent screams. Ava had transformed, and with her, the entire town felt an unsettling shift in the very fabric of what it meant to be. The chilling realization washed over her like ice-cold water. There was no turning back now. Ava had embraced the darkness within her, a darkness that promised power and control over the fears that gripped the townsfolk, but at what cost? She stood on the precipice of a new existence, a shadowed queen ruling over a kingdom of silence, and as time dragged on like a snail on a hot summer's day, she would fully understand the weight of that silence. And as she floated among the spirits, their stories coursing through her like a swift river, she felt the world meld into one distorted reality. Eldermere's fate was sealed. Each shadow held a piece of its essence, the laughter and light long gone. Ava, once just a girl, had emerged as a powerful force of darkness, a reminder that silence could indeed corrupt, turning hope into despair, love into fear, and laughter into echoes of sorrow forever lost in the vast, unending night. From that day onward, Ava was intertwined with the shadows, forging a path that would forever change the history of Eldermere, a tale whispered through the ages, of the girl who embraced the darkness and became its queen. Months moved like the slow, heavy clouds, drifting through years that turned the once vibrant town of Eldermere into a hauntingly quiet ghost of its former self. It was a place that had known laughter, warmth, and the simple joys of life. But now, in its force Akenis, Eldermere felt like a forgotten puzzle with pieces lost, waiting for someone to breathe life back into it. Each passing day hid the town deeper in an ominous silence that seemed to cling to everything like a thick fog. The streets, once filled with the happy sounds of children playing and people greeting one another, were now empty and still. Cracked pavements lined with wild grass swayed gently in the breeze, as if trying to remember the footsteps of those who had come before, while the rusting swings in the park creaked eerily in the silence, missing laughter and the joy of play. It was unsettling, as if the town itself was holding its breath, afraid to disturb the silence that had taken over like an unwelcome blanket. Shadows shifted through the streets, appearing and fading as if caught in a never-ending dance. The shadows whispered secrets of the past, memories of laughter, friendship, and the warmth of family that no longer held true in the hearts of those who once lived there. A shroud of melancholy enveloped the town, a reminder of the terrible loss that hung over it like a storm cloud. The few souls who dared to approach the edge of the nearby forest echoed the tales that had taken on a life of their own. It was said that the forest was home to a mysterious fog that beckoned people closer, inviting them to explore while simultaneously instilling a feeling of inexplicable dread. They would stand at the threshold, peering into the swirling mist, where twisted branches reached out like fingers, gnarled and ancient. The trees loomed over them, silent watchers who seemed to hold the town's heart within their thickets. Many believed that the forest was alive, breathing softly in the stillness, hiding the truth of what had happened to Ava and the others she had drawn into her world. As the sun set and darkness fell over Eldermere, the town seemed to come alive in an eerie way. Ghostly whispers floated through the chilly air, echoing the names of lost loved ones, friends, daughters, sisters, each one a reminder of the friendships that had faded into the shadows. Rumors swirled among the townspeople, growing more exaggerated with each retelling. Everyone spoke in hushed tones about Ava, the girl who had vanished into the depths of the forest. Within that dark maze of trees, Ava had transformed into something other than who she once had been. She was no longer simply a girl lost in the woods but a monument of despair, a keeper of sad stories that twisted around her like the vines hiding her within the thickets. The air was thick with the essence of her sorrow, twining and curling around the branches and leaves, forever entwined with the shadows that had swallowed her whole. Her laughter, once bright and vibrant, became a haunting sound, echoing with memories of every friendly voice she had ever known. When those unfortunate souls found their way onto the treacherous path leading into the forest, they discovered more than just twisted trees and fading daylight. The old cabins scattered throughout held the weight of forgotten stories. Faded photographs hung crookedly on the walls, showcasing smiles frozen in time. Each piece of furniture, like an old rocking chair that once belonged to Ava's family, creaked and swayed gently, as though mourning their long-gone occupants. The whispers of forgotten dreams and lost hopes filled the air, partnered with the ever-present scent of damp wood. This was a land that cradled loneliness and despair, waiting for anyone who dared to tread closer. Some evenings, if one paused and listened closely enough while standing at the edge of the forest, they might hear the faint echoes of agony softly spilling from Ava's lips. The air seemed to carry fragmented words, a mix of muffled cries for help and the sorrowful laughter from the depths of her soul. It was a chilling melody, intertwining pleas with the haunting giggles that sent shivers down the spines of those brave enough to linger. In this twisted reality, Ava's spirit was no longer alone. It swirled and danced amid the shadows, traversing the ethereal realm between light and dark. It was a realm filled with lost souls, a tapestry woven of sorrow, regret, and fear, each thread a reminder of their unfinished stories. Those who spoke of Eldermere often eyeing it with trepidation, their voices quiet, as if fearing the place itself might hear them. Murmurs spread from town to town, warning all about the forsaken land home to the cries of the unremembered. Travelers and adventurous spirits avoided Eldermere, wrapping themselves in tales of warnings that transformed into bedtime stories for children. The name Ava became a whispered curse, a reminder to cross oneself and ward off any thoughts of her tragic fate. Parents shared stories of the girl who wandered into the woods, never to return, instilling fear within the hearts of their children as the moonlight cast eerie shadows on their walls at night. But despite the fear, the forest continued to lure the curious, a malevolent force that endlessly tugged at the edges of the townspeople's minds, drawing them closer to the silence where the shadows lurked. They felt the quiet pull in their hearts, a connection that tugged harder with every whispered warning. Eldermere echoed with tragedy, and each lost individual only fed the darkness that kept Ava bound to the woods, entwining her more deeply with every soul lost. Under the delicate light of a sliver of moon, a wandering soul ventured too close one fateful night, drawn in by a whisper of curiosity. With tentative steps, she approached the cabin that had become a refuge for the lost, the abandoned, and the forgotten. The air grew thick around her, mingling with the scent of old wood and a hint of something sweet, yet alarming. Each step she took seemed to echo in the silence, and an uneasy feeling filled her heart. As she crossed the threshold of the cabin, she felt an odd tingle, an almost electric sense that made the hair on her arms stand on end. It was as if the wooden walls were alive, breathing and waiting with an otherworldly anticipation. In that instant, Ava's essence brushed against her like a chilling breeze, icy fingers dancing lightly across her skin. The feeling twisted in her mind, filling her with both dread and an inexplicable pull toward the shadows. "Join us," Ava seemed to whisper, though her voice felt as though it were coming from far away, a distant echo lost in time. The invitation was sweet yet terrifying, an enticing song laced with sorrow. The new soul took a tentative step inside, her breath catching in her throat as she felt the cold presence encircle her like a dense fog, indistinct and ever-present. In that cabin, which stood as a haunting monument to the agony of the past, the girl felt her heart slow, replaced by an eerie stillness that promised both peace and despair. Thoughts of her life outside faded as she stared into the shadows, the darkness beckoning her closer. "What is left outside?" the whispers seemed to ask, swirling around her thoughts, blurring the line between fear and calmness. For Ava, despair had become her reality, and her laughter twisted into something sinister among the trees. The newcomer slipped silently into the shadows, her spirit abandoning the realities of the world, relinquishing her voice to the forest's entangling despair. Thus, the cycle continued, swirling into an endless, horrifying dance of entwined destinies, where each new gain only led to greater loss. The forest thrummed with life, or perhaps it was a deceptive pulse fed by the knowledge of those who had vanished into the embrace of the night. Eldermere lingered in its silence, a town submerged in an ocean of memories. The only sound that resonated in the depths of its underbelly was the soft, sinister murmur of Ava's laughter, echoing off the shadows. The quiet reminder of a fate too dire to escape. To vanish, forever a whisper among the tangled dark. A silent eternity awaited them all,